The lecture hall was a cavern of nervous silence, broken only by the rustle of turning pages and the frantic scratching of pencils. I clutched my exam paper, the red 98 circled at the top, feeling less like a grade and more like a verdict. I had done it. I had actually aced Professor Finch's legendary data structures and algorithms midterm, a test known for breaking the spirits of even the most dedicated students. For a single, glorious moment, a wave of pure, unadulterated relief washed over me, so potent it made my hands tremble. I allowed myself to imagine the shock on my parents' faces when I told them, their pride a tangible thing I could almost touch. That fragile hope was incinerated a second later. Professor Finch stood at the podium, his presence as cold and imposing as a marble statue. He didn't need to raise his voice. His silence commanded a room better than any shout. "It has come to my attention," he began, his tone dripping with icy precision, "that some students operate under the misguided belief that cleverness can supplant genuine comprehension." His gaze, sharp and unnervingly direct, found me in the third row and held me there. "There will be zero tolerance for academic dishonesty in this course. The consequences will be severe." The blood drained from my face, leaving me lightheaded. He wasn't just making a general statement. He was talking about me. The unspoken accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I felt the eyes of my classmates shift toward me, a mix of morbid curiosity and pity. My perfect score, the product of countless sleepless nights, now felt like a target painted on my back, marking me for an execution I never saw coming. "My name is Cassie Petrova, and I'm fighting for a future my parents couldn't dream of. Every textbook I buy represents a week of meals skipped, every credit hour paid for, with double shifts at the campus library." When Professor Finch dismissed the class, I marched to his office, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Professor, I can assure you I didn't cheat," I said, my voice tighter than I wanted. He barely glanced up from his papers. "Miss Petrova, is it? Your performance defies logical progression." His eyes flickered to my worn backpack, my discount store shoes. Some backgrounds simply lack the foundation for this level of work. The implication cut deeper than any direct accusation. He wasn't just questioning my integrity, he was judging my very right to be here. That's when I realized this wasn't about one exam. This was a war for my future, and he'd just fired the first shot. I walked out knowing I needed proof, but what I didn't know was that my search for evidence would uncover something that would shake the entire department to its core. For 3 sleepless nights, I built my case like a programmer debugging complex code. Meticulous notes, time-stamped practice files, even security camera footage from the library showing my study marathons. When I laid it all before Department Chair Dr. Evans, she listened with a pained expression. "Professor Finch brings in millions in research grants," she finally said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A formal hearing could complicate your future." The choice was clear. Accept the 0 or become another student crushed by the system. I took the F, my scholarship hanging by a thread. But as I left her office, I noticed something odd. A framed photo on her desk showed her and Finch at some university event, their smiles looking a little too friendly. It was then I understood this went deeper than one professor's prejudice. They were protecting each other, and I was just collateral damage in their game of academic politics. The following weeks became a masterclass in psychological warfare. Finch would pause, behind my chair during labs, his shadow falling across my screen. "Note everyone," he'd announce, "how Miss Petrova's solution, while functional, demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of core principles." He gave me C's on A-quality work while awarding top marks to students who clearly copied my logic. My classmates became ghosts, avoiding me like I carried some contagious failure. I ate lunch alone in library carols, the taste of injustice like ash in my mouth. But his cruelty forged something unexpected within me, a diamond-hard resolve. I began documenting everything, every biased comment, every unfair grade. Little did I know these records would later become weapons in a battle far greater than either of us could imagine. The final project loomed. A complex sorting algorithm worth 50% of our grade. While others panicked, I saw my canvas. I didn't just want to pass. I wanted to create something so undeniably brilliant that even Finch couldn't ignore it. For 3 weeks, I lived in the computer lab, surviving on vending machine snacks and determination. My algorithm became my obsession. Elegant, efficient, incorporating techniques I'd discovered through independent research. The night before submission, I found something strange in the code documentation. Patterns that seemed familiar, almost like I shook the thought away. It was just exhaustion playing tricks. I submitted my masterpiece with a mix of pride and dread, unaware that my work would soon become the centerpiece in a scandal that would make national headlines. The email arrived at 2:17 a.m. See me immediately, office hours tomorrow. No signature, just Finch's standard header. My stomach dropped through the floor. When I entered his book-lined office, he didn't offer me a seat. Your project, he began, his back to me as he stared at my code on his monitor. It's suspiciously sophisticated. He turned, his eyes cold. In fact, it bears striking resemblance to unpublished work from one of my doctoral researchers. He slid a paper across his desk, my project cover page, now defaced by a giant red F. Consider this your final grade. I stood there, frozen, my future crumbling before his smug expression, but then I noticed something on his desk that made my blood run cold. A research grant proposal, with a title nearly identical to my project's innovative core. The coincidence was too perfect. He wasn't just failing me, he was stealing from me. The withdrawal process felt like planning my own funeral. My parents' disappointed silence on the phone echoed louder than any shouting. I took a data entry job, my days reduced to mindless typing in a gray cubicle farm. But at night, I'd open my laptop, that cold coal of anger still glowing in my chest. I started a blog called CodeClarity, breaking down complex concepts into simple tutorials. It was my silent rebellion. What began as therapy soon attracted readers, dozens, then hundreds of struggling students. Their grateful comments were water on parched soil. But the real turning point came when one commenter asked about recursive optimization techniques, the very method Finch had accused me of stealing. And that's when I knew this wasn't over yet. Months passed, and CodeClarity grew beyond a blog into a community. I started filming simple video lessons for my kitchen table, explaining concepts with a clarity Finch never managed. When a major tech influencer shared my course, my website crashed from the traffic. 50,000 new students enrolled in a week. Forbes called me an education disruptor. I was building everything Finch said I couldn't. But my success came with unexpected attention, including an email from a graduate student in Finch's department. I know what he did, the message began. Meet me, there's something you need to see. The sender's name was familiar. He was the doctoral researcher Finch claimed I'd plagiarized. I met Mark in a quiet coffee shop off campus. He looked tired, his fingers nervously turning a ceramic mug. Finch has been taking credit for student work for years, he confessed, his voice low. My thesis? His now? Your algorithm? He's submitting it for a prestigious award. He slid a USB drive across the table. This has everything. Emails, version histories, the original grant proposal he's basing on your work. I held the tiny drive, feeling its weight like a loaded weapon. But as I stood to leave, Mark grabbed my wrist. Be careful, he warned. He knows you're successful now, and he's scared. That's when I noticed a man watching us from across the street. Someone I recognized from Finch's department. The game had just gotten dangerous. The USB drive contained a treasure trove of evidence, but using it meant going nuclear. I spent weeks verifying everything, my lawyer advising caution. Meanwhile, CodeClarity kept growing, now partnering with coding boot camps and small colleges. Then Finch made his move. He published a scathing article decrying unqualified amateurs corrupting education. Though he never named me, the target was clear. The coding community erupted in my defense. The hashtag #StandWithCodeClarity going viral. But in the chaos, I discovered something chilling in the documents. Finch wasn't working alone. There were others in the department involved, and they were planning to launch a competing platform using my methods. The war was about to escalate beyond either of us. Armed with undeniable proof, I did the one thing Finch never expected. I went public. Not with anger, but with overwhelming evidence. I published a detailed timeline showing how my work predated his research, complete with dated code repositories and the testimonies of other former students. The story exploded across tech media. The university launched an immediate investigation, but I knew that wasn't enough. So I made my masterstroke. I released my entire curriculum as open source, making it impossible for anyone to profit from or claim ownership of these teaching methods. As institutions worldwide began adopting my materials, I received an unexpected email from the university's new dean of students. He wanted to meet and offered to reinstate my degree. But there was a condition that would test everything I believed in. The meeting with Dean Roberts was nothing like I expected. He offered not just reinstatement, but a formal apology and a scholarship named in my honor. "We're cleaning house," he said frankly. "Finch is gone, along with several others. We want you to help us rebuild the department." It was everything I'd wanted 2 years ago. But as I sat in that polished conference room, I realized the old dream didn't fit anymore. I had built something greater outside their walls. Politely declining felt like shedding chains I didn't know I still wore. As I left campus for what I thought was the last time, a student stopped me. "You're Cassie from CodeClarity, aren't you?" she asked, her eyes wide. "You're the reason I haven't dropped out." In that moment, I understood my path was always meant to be different and far more meaningful. CodeClarity became a nonprofit, partnering with universities worldwide to provide free CS education. We've helped over 2 million students with a special scholarship fund for first-generation students like I was. Sometimes I look at my old transcript, that F in Finch's class now framed beside my Visionary in Education award. It reminds me that sometimes the greatest successes come from the failures others try to force upon us. The system wanted me broken, but it created something it couldn't control. And for every student like me fighting to prove they belong, my story stands as proof that sometimes the best way to win is to build a better game entirely. The university's invitation arrived on heavy, embossed stationery, the gold foil catching the afternoon light in my office. They wanted to honor me with their prestigious Trailblazer Award at the annual Innovation Gala. My team erupted in celebration, but my stomach tightened into a familiar knot. Walking back into that world felt like returning to a crime scene where I'd been the victim. The night of the gala, I chose a simple black suit, my only jewelry the small, discreet CodeClarity pin my students had gifted me. As I entered the glittering ballroom, crystal chandeliers throwing rainbows across champagne flutes, I saw him across the crowded space. Professor Finch stood near the string quartet, noticeably thinner, his hair whiter, but with the same rigid military posture I remembered so well. He was laughing with university administrators who'd once called him the department's brightest star. Our eyes met across the sea of sequins and silk, and the festive music seemed to fade into distant background noise. He turned away first, but not before I caught the flash of recognition in his eyes, and something darker, more complicated beneath the surface. The dean approached, beaming with institutional pride, but my attention remained fixed on Finch. Why was he here, at what was supposed to be my moment of triumph? The answer came when I reached my assigned table and found a single, typewritten note waiting at my place setting. "Some bridges should remain burned. Watch your step." During my acceptance speech, I spoke about breaking down barriers in education, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing through the grand ballroom. Afterward, as well-wishers and journalists surrounded me, I felt a familiar tap on my shoulder that sent chills down my spine. Finch stood there, a tight, unnatural smile stretching across his face. "A remarkable enterprise you've built," he said, his voice like stones grinding together. "Though I must question whether popularity truly indicates quality in education." Before I could formulate a response, he leaned closer, his breath smelling faintly of expensive scotch. "They're all watching you now, you know, the accreditation boards, the federal grant committees, the education publishers." His smile widened but didn't reach his eyes. "The higher you climb, the more eyes watching for your inevitable fall." He disappeared back into the crowd before I could reply, leaving me chilled to the bone. Was that a threat or some strange attempt at warning? My phone buzzed urgently in my pocket, our security chief's direct line. "Cassie, we have a serious problem," his tense voice confirmed my sudden dread. Our main server was under a sophisticated, coordinated cyber attack, and the IP addresses traced directly back to the university's network. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. The digital assault was brutal and precisely targeted, focusing on our student database, containing millions of records. My technical team worked through the night, cups of cold coffee littering their desks as they finally managed to contain the breach at 4:17 a.m. The digital fingerprints led unmistakably to a specific campus building, the Computer Science Department's Advanced Research Wing. I sat alone in my hotel room, watching dawn break over the campus that had once rejected me, the morning light painting the familiar buildings in golden hues that belied the darkness of what was happening. The dean claimed complete ignorance when I called him, his voice shaking with either genuine shock or skilled acting. But the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Someone within the university's walls was actively trying to destroy everything we'd built. My security team wanted to go public immediately, to expose the attack and demand accountability, but I hesitated, considering the students who would be caught in the crossfire. Then I remembered something from the old USB drive Mark had given me years ago. Finch's son was a cybersecurity expert who'd been recently hired as a university consultant. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity, forming a dangerous picture I couldn't ignore. This wasn't just about personal revenge anymore. It had become a battle for our very survival. I made a decision that terrified me to my core. Instead of defending, we would lay an elaborate trap. I requested an emergency private meeting with Dean Roberts the next morning. The formal request sent before sunrise. His office smelled of rich wood polish and old books, the scent of institutional power I remembered so well. I laid out the evidence methodically, presenting the server logs and IP traces without direct accusation, watching his face carefully for any telltale reactions. He listened intently, his expression growing increasingly grave with each piece of documentation I presented. "The timing is indeed concerning," he admitted, running a hand through his thinning hair. "But Professor Finch no longer has any system access privileges. That was revoked after the previous investigation." That's when I played what I hoped was my winning card, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "His son does. And according to campus employment records I obtained, he was granted special administrative access last month, specifically to the systems that were compromised." The dean's face went pale beneath his professional demeanor. He stood abruptly and walked to the large window overlooking the quad, his shoulders tense. "There's something you should know," he said quietly, almost whispering. "The board is deeply divided about our continuing partnership with CodeClarity. Some traditionalists feel genuinely threatened by your success and what it represents." The attack wasn't just personal revenge, it was a clear message from powerful people who wanted us gone forever. They were either using Finch as their instrument, or he was cleverly using them. Either way, we found ourselves in a war we hadn't known we were fighting. The dean's next words chilled me to the bone. "Be very careful, Cassie. These people don't play by the rules you're used to. They play for keeps, and they have everything to lose." That night, long after the gala's cleanup crews had left, I did something I hadn't done in years. I visited the 24-hour computer lab where I'd spent so many desperate, lonely nights, coding until my vision blurred. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune, and through the glass wall, I saw Finch sitting slumped at my old workstation, his head buried in his hands as if carrying the weight of the world. When he noticed my reflection in the dark monitor screen, he didn't seem surprised, just weary. "They're using me," he said without preamble, his voice rough with emotion. "The traditionalists on the board, the old guard. They want me to discredit you to protect their outdated programs and funding streams." He looked ancient under the harsh laboratory lighting, the lines on his face deeper than I remembered. My career, my reputation, everything I built. His voice trailed off into miserable silence. I realized with sudden, stunning clarity that we were both pawns in a much larger game, two opponents being manipulated by forces we couldn't see. The real enemy wasn't standing before me. It was the entrenched system that valued tradition over genuine progress, that protected its own at any cost. And that's when the idea came to me, not to fight them directly, but to expose their corruption for the world to see. We would use their own weapons against them, turn turning their tactics into their downfall. "Help me," I said, the words surprising both of us with their rawness. His eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in calculation. The trap was set, but now I wondered, who was really catching whom? The plan we devised was incredibly risky, a high-stakes gamble that could end both our careers, but Finch's reluctant cooperation gave us a crucial advantage we desperately needed. We created an elaborate mirrored server filled with carefully crafted fake data and deliberately left security vulnerabilities, then waited patiently for the hackers to take the bait, while our systems recorded every keystroke, every command, every digital footprint. What we discovered over the next 48 hours was bigger and more sinister than we had ever imagined. A powerful consortium of for-profit education companies was secretly funding the attacks. Terrified of our free educational model and what it meant for their billion-dollar industry, they'd been working covertly with certain board members to systematically sabotage any innovation that threatened their profit margins, using the university as both shield and weapon. We gathered overwhelming evidence: recordings of secret meetings, documentation of hidden payments, emails detailing a coordinated campaign specifically designed to destroy CodeClarity's reputation and operations. My furious team wanted to immediately go to the authorities to unleash the full force of the law. But I knew better from hard experience. Taking down powerful, well-connected corporations required more than just proof. It required perfect timing and undeniable public pressure. We waited with tense patience until they launched their biggest, most aggressive attack yet, then struck back with overwhelming, precisely targeted force. We planned our counterstrike for the exact day of our ambitious Education for All global initiative launch, ensuring maximum impact and visibility. As thousands of new students from underserved communities signed up for our programs, we simultaneously released a meticulously researched documentary detailing the entire conspiracy, complete with verified documents and damning recordings. The media explosion was instantaneous and overwhelming, spreading across social media platforms and news networks within hours. Major international outlets picked up the story, framing it as a classic David versus Goliath battle for the soul of modern education. Our student enrollment numbers tripled overnight as public sympathy swung decisively in our favor. Donations poured in from around the world, along with messages of support from educators, parents, and even some courageous politicians. The sweetest victory, however, came when the National Accreditation Board not only completely cleared us of any wrongdoing, but publicly praised our unprecedented transparency and ethical standards. They offered their highest possible rating, officially calling CodeClarity the undeniable future of ethical, accessible education. But our dramatic victory came with heavy, unexpected costs, including Finch's complete and very public professional ruin. I watched his spectacular fall from grace with a confusing mixture of satisfaction and unexpected sadness, wondering if there could have been another way. In the investigation's aftermath, Finch resigned quietly without any public statement or farewell ceremony. The university board underwent massive, painful restructuring, with several prominent members facing formal investigation and potential legal consequences. I received a handwritten note from Finch exactly 1 week later, the shaky penmanship telling its own story of his deteriorated state. "You fought better than I ever taught you to," the brief message read. No apology, no excuses, no requests for mercy or understanding, just those 6 simple words that felt like both ultimate surrender and the highest, most genuine praise I'd ever received. My exhausted but ecstatic team celebrated our hard-won victory, but I felt strangely hollow inside, the cost of war weighing heavier than I'd anticipated. The battle was decisively won, but the human toll felt more significant than I'd allowed myself to consider during the fighting. That's when my assistant interrupted our subdued celebration with news I never anticipated receiving. The White House was calling directly. The president's senior education advisor personally wanted CodeClarity to lead a groundbreaking national digital literacy program, with full government backing and substantial funding. It was everything we'd supposedly worked toward, the ultimate validation of our mission, but something felt immediately wrong in my gut. The timing was too perfect, the offer too generous, the conditions too favorable. Were we being skillfully co-opted by the very system we'd fought so hard to change? The White House meeting was surreal, an experience straight out of a political thriller. Polished marble floors, watchful Secret Service agents, and the palpable weight of history in every corridor we walked through. But as I sat in a lavish conference room explaining our educational model to polished policymakers, I gradually recognized the subtle danger lurking beneath their generous offer. Their carefully crafted version of accessible education came with invisible strings attached: mandatory standardized testing requirements, extensive government oversight, bureaucratic compromises that would inevitably destroy the very flexibility and innovation that made CodeClarity successful. They wanted to neatly fit us into their existing system, to tame our disruptive potential into something safe, manageable, and ultimately ineffective. I found myself doing the unthinkable, the words leaving my mouth, before I fully processed their consequences, politely but firmly turning down presidential support. My stunned team thought I'd lost my mind, that I was risking everything we'd built on a misguided principle. But some deep instinct told me this particular opportunity was actually a beautifully disguised trap. Walking away from the White House deal made immediate headlines across news platforms, but not the celebratory kind we wanted. Arrogant, idealistic, naive, the negative labels stuck in public discourse. Donations slowed noticeably as uncertainty grew. Long-term partners grew nervous, their support becoming conditional and hesitant. For the first time in years, I lay awake, night after night, staring at my bedroom ceiling and wondering if I'd made a fatal, irreversible mistake that would destroy everything we'd sacrificed to build. Then the emails started flooding in, not dozens but thousands of them, arriving from every corner of the globe. Teachers from underfunded rural schools, parents of special needs children fighting for basic educational rights, retired professors offering to volunteer their expertise without payment. They'd seen the news coverage and understood exactly why I'd walked away from the glittering offer. "Don't become them," one veteran teacher wrote from a small town I'd never heard of. "Stay broken with the rest of us, where the real work happens." Their powerful, heartfelt words became our new foundation, stronger and more durable than any government contract could ever be. We launched the Broken Ladder Global Initiative shortly afterward, a decentralized network of passionate educators creating free, culturally localized curriculum for their specific communities. We consciously stopped chasing exponential growth and started deliberately chasing meaningful, measurable impact. The strange, wonderful thing? The financial support followed naturally, not from billionaires or massive corporations, but from the very communities we served, in small but significant amounts. $5 and $10 donations arrived with moving notes about children who could suddenly read, teenagers who discovered a passion for coding, grandparents learning to video call distant family members for the first time. We were slowly, carefully building something authentic that no one could co-opt, control, or commodify. A year after the White House decision, I visited one of our community centers in a neighborhood strikingly similar to where I'd grown up, the familiar sights and sounds bringing back bittersweet memories. A young girl of about 9 approached me cautiously, her eyes serious beyond her years, clutching a tablet we'd donated to the center. "My teacher says you failed once," she stated matter-of-factly, studying my face with unnerving intensity. When I nodded, admitting this truth I usually kept carefully framed as a lesson rather than a shame, her entire face transformed with a radiant, gap-toothed smile. "Good," she declared with the simple wisdom children sometimes possess. "That means I can fail too and still become important like you." Her profound words stayed with me, echoing in my mind as I later returned to the university to accept an honorary doctorate I'd never sought. The same stage where Finch had once publicly accused me of cheating now hosted me as the keynote speaker for their graduation ceremony. I looked out at the sea of bright, hopeful young faces capped and gowned in traditional academic regalia and saw my younger self reflected in every single one. "The world will constantly try to grade you, to rank you, to define your worth by their narrow standards," I told them, my voice strong and clear in the hushed auditorium. But the most powerful, lasting education happens only when you stop trying to pass their limited tests and start courageously creating your own. After the ceremony ended, a young woman with tired eyes and familiar determination waited patiently to speak with me. "They failed me too," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Can I please come work with you?" The circle was complete, the wound finally healed, the legacy secured. My story has long since stopped being about revenge or even personal redemption. It's evolved into something larger, something more meaningful. It's about what happens after you supposedly win, when the public applause inevitably fades and you're left alone with the critical choice of either becoming what you once fought against or building something genuinely new and different. CodeClarity now serves millions of students worldwide through various programs and partnerships. But we deliberately measure our true success in individual human stories, not impersonal statistics. The single mother who transformed her life by becoming a software engineer, the refugee who built a simple app to find missing family members amid chaos, the quiet child who just desperately needed one person to say, "You belong here exactly as you are." The rigid educational system that tried so hard to break me ultimately created something it never could have anticipated or contained. Not another conventionally successful graduate adding to institutional prestige, but an educational revolution that can't be contained within traditional walls or controlled by traditional powers. We're not just teaching coding skills, we're teaching boundless possibility, inherent worth, and unshakable self-belief. And every single time someone somewhere decides their background doesn't have to determine their future, we win all over again. Today, CodeClarity operates actively in 147 countries across diverse cultures and economic landscapes. We've consciously stopped counting mere student numbers and started counting entire communities, transformed, generations impacted, cycles of poverty broken. The young woman who approached me with tears after that graduation speech now successfully runs our global mentorship program, having helped thousands of students. The bright-eyed girl who declared that failing was acceptable? She's currently our youngest ever scholarship recipient, already showing remarkable promise. Professor Finch passed away peacefully last year after a brief illness. I attended his small, quiet funeral and stood respectfully at the back, watching silently as former colleagues and students praised a complicated man I realized I had never truly known. Later, as the gathering dispersed, his daughter approached and handed me a sealed envelope without a word, her eyes full of unspoken understanding. Inside, protected by crisp tissue paper, was my original final project submission, the one he'd failed so long ago, with a new grade written in his familiar but now shaky handwriting. A+, for finally teaching me what real education means. I had it framed simply and hung it beside my Trailblazer Award in my office. For everyone still fighting to prove they're enough, my door remains deliberately open, our ladders are waiting, and the only grade that ultimately matters is the one you honestly give yourself. The quiet revolution continues, one worthy student at a time, forever forward.